I'm Ben Swallow. I'm a lecturer in statistics in the School of Maths and Statistics at St Andrews. Most of my work involves in projects on Bayesian statistics particularly, but throughout COVID I've been involved in a lot of projects looking at trying to help understand how the pandemic is changing through space and time, and trying to get good estimates of parameters that are interesting for policymakers and also for government. So what we're interested in trying to do is there's a lot of general interest in what's called nowcasting. So the idea is we want to understand what the pandemic is doing right now. Is it getting worse? Is it improving? Have we introduced some sort of intervention, whether that's vaccination or lockdown or some non-pharmaceutical intervention? Has it had an impact? Are we seeing cases and hospitalisation numbers dropping? Just generally trying to have some number or metric which allows us to say, are things improving? Are they remaining relatively stable, or are they getting worse? And you will have heard a lot in the news about the R number as a way of measuring whether the pandemic is currently increasing, decreasing, or staying stable, and the magic number 1 being the change point. If it's greater than 1, then it's generally getting worse. If it's less than 1, we generally say it's getting better. The problem with that is it's very complicated to calculate. There's lots of uncertainty in the estimation of the R number. It's computationally very intensive, and it would take days or weeks to run for a single time period, and the decisions needed to be made much more quickly than that. So what we wanted to see is if we could use much more simplistic statistical models or statistical approaches which would give us similar numbers that we could use, but in a much faster way. Yeah, so a lot of the problems are generally dealing with real data. There's lots of difficulties and errors and biases that are often introduced into these sorts of surveys. They're generally done in fairly sporadic ways, so it relies on people taking a test, reporting the results, then the delay in time from when people report the results to when it actually gets released. There's also multiple measurements, so we have measurements of the number of positive cases, hospitalizations, numbers of people who are unfortunately dying from the pandemic. The difficulty is that although we have these multiple measurements which are changing through time, they're not really independent of each other. So we might have 4 different metrics, but really there's only sort of one thing what we're interested in, which is what's the state of the pandemic. So we wanted a method that sort of was able to combine those measurements into a single metric, but also accounting for the fact that if you test positive, then there's going to be some measurable delay before you then become potentially hospitalized, and then another delay before you either recover or sadly don't. Yeah, so I think one of the main reasons was for policymakers who wanted to make very quick decisions. So the approach we developed was much quicker than what's currently out there. So I think in terms of that, it gives policymakers something really very quick to say, right, okay, where are we currently at? What's the current state of the pandemic? And we've matched that up very closely with the estimates from the more complex mathematical models that build in all this epidemiological knowledge. And certainly those still very much have a place. We're not saying this is a replacement for that, but it's a way of sort of getting, in the meantime, while you're waiting for these more complex models to run, you can get a very good approximation to that in a much quicker time frame. This was a collaboration with a student of mine who did a summer internship, Wenxiang. So she did a lot of the code development of the work, and also a collaborator of mine, Jasmina Panofska-Griffiths at the University of Oxford, who's an expert in epidemiological modelling. So she was able to advise much more on the epidemiology and make sure that the methods we were developing made sense from that perspective as well.